Prosecutors blame parents for the Club Q shooter not being convicted for a prior violent incident. The Respect for Marriage Act passing is a reminder that Colorado does not allow same-sex marriage if the Supreme Court strikes down national protections. The city of Denver says there's no evidence migrants were sent here as a political stunt, and they have no idea how many more are coming. Colorado's requirement to report suspected child abuse impacts some innocent families more than others.
For some reason, they're being reported more often.
The Attorney General joins the effort to stop Safeway and King Soopers from merging. And when a therapy horse went blind, it only increased his ability to connect with patients. All that tonight on Next. Prosecutors are blaming the family of the Club Q shooting suspect for the fact that the suspect was not convicted for prior threats. Building a bomb, having weapons, talking about becoming the next mass killer. The DA talked publicly today after a judge ordered that previous case unsealed. El Paso County District Attorney Michael Allen says the case was dismissed because prosecutors had trouble tracking down key witnesses and getting their cooperation. So deputies arrested the suspect last year after their grandmother called 911. She reported the suspect had threatened the family with a bomb and guns and talked about being a mass shooter. The suspect was charged with 3 counts of kidnapping and 2 counts of menacing. That case stalled and then fell apart as prosecutors struggled to subpoena the suspect's grandparents who had moved out of state. The DA said the case could not be prosecuted without the cooperation of the family.
Go ahead and come on in, boy.
You have to have witnesses that are listed victims to come into the courtroom and testify as to why they are a victim, what happened to them, what was said to them, what they saw. Without those witnesses getting on the stand, there's no way to get a conviction on those charges.
A judge dismissed that initial case in August, a few months before the Club Q shooting in the Springs. There's a temporary protection order issued on the suspect, but law enforcement did not request that the suspect be ordered not to possess or buy a gun. Congress passed recognition for same-sex marriages nationwide today, with all Colorado Republicans in Congress voting against it, all Colorado Democrats in Congress voting for it. The move is designed to protect those marriages if the conservative Supreme Court overturns precedent on the issue. It's a good time to remember Colorado's state constitution still bans same-sex marriage, so that would be the law here if the Supreme Court strikes down protections. The bill passed by the U.S. House today, now headed for the president's signature, requires states to recognize same-sex marriages done in other states, but does not force any one state to allow new same-sex marriages. Go back to 2006. Colorado voters approved a constitutional amendment banning same-sex marriage. It's still there in the law. It's just overruled by the current Supreme Court precedent. If the 6-3 conservative majority on the court were to someday overturn same-sex marriage protections, couples here would have to leave Colorado if they wanted to get married, but their marriage would be recognized everywhere under the bill passed today. Democrats say this is about adding that preemptive national protection for same-sex marriage. The head of the Colorado Republican Party called it sinister and dangerous and designed to, quote, rip apart society. City of Denver is activating its Emergency Operations Center to help hundreds of migrants who have come here recently. 100 or so in a large group this week, another 50 right before that, 300 total in recent months. And the city does not know how many more might be coming. Our Steve Steger looks at how the city and nonprofits are preparing for unknown numbers.
When 150 migrants without a place to stay flooded into Denver this week, it was all hands on deck at an emergency shelter established by the city.
One thing they said was, we need breakfast.
John Ewing and the team at Volunteers of America kicked right into gear with a ton of other nonprofits.
It's touching to see how grateful they were for it all. It's also heartbreaking. You know, this isn't something that anybody wants to see or anybody should experience.
It wasn't something the city expected to experience so quickly.
Over the past week, what had been sort of a slow, steady stream of folks coming increased significantly.
Evan Dreyer is Mayor Hancock's deputy chief of staff. He says over the last 2 months, about 300 migrants, mostly escaping Venezuela, trickled into the city. Trickled meaning only a small number each day. But this weekend, a group of 40 to 50 arrived. Then Monday, 90 more, enough to strain the city's existing shelter system.
Some have arrived through Denver International Airport. Some have arrived through buses. Some have arrived through personal vehicles.
Why they came to Denver, still an open question. how they got here?
From what we've been able to gather, there was sort of an informal gathering, some on social media, among those folks themselves. This does not appear to be anything that was organized by another government.
And more are expected in the coming days and weeks. How many? That's unclear.
It seems like if this is an ongoing issue, that a lot of nonprofits are going to have to step up and help and make sure that people are being taken care of.
So in the meantime, the city is turning to nonprofits, faith-based agencies, and non-governmental entities, asking for help finding shelter beyond a cot on a gym floor.
It really takes a lot of people to take care of an issue this big.
So the city hasn't been able to put a dollar figure on how much this effort is costing them. They say they'll seek federal reimbursement for at least some of it. In the meantime, if you want to help, the city is asking you to donate to any of the organizations helping on the ground. They have a list on their website. They're also working on a location where people could drop physical items off for folks who maybe are starting fresh and need something new. But they're still working on that location right now. They hope to have something soon.
So we know the southern border has been overwhelmed with numbers for months. We know that migrants have been moved through one means or another, their own free will or somebody else moving them, to interior cities for months. Did the city know this was coming?
The city had a plan. The city says that they were ready for people to come and that they've known for 2 months that there have been people trickling here. What they weren't ready for was close to 100 people coming in one single day, and that completely overwhelmed the shelter system. The Denver Rescue Mission reached out to the city and said, we need something because we're not going to be able to house all of these people. The question now is, will it continue to slow down? It's gone back down to a rate of about 20 or 30 per day, they're saying right now, people still coming into the city. If that's slow enough, they might be able to catch back up.
Yeah.
It's just a big question.
I'm sure part of it is how fast they can get people into jobs, housing, things like that, so they're not in the shelter system.
Yep.
All right, Steve, thank you. Colorado's Democratic Party will have a new leader for the first time in 6 years. Chairwoman Morgan Carroll is leaving after the political equivalent of a walk-off grand slam. Democrats' blowout wins in November have the party in its strongest position in Colorado history. You can expect a number of candidates to get in the race to replace Carroll. Republican Party Chairwoman Christy Burton Brown is facing calls to leave after the GOP's annihilation in November. Far-right Republican leaders and election deniers recently gathered outside her office. They were put in the Boot Barn parking lot where they called prominent Republicans whores and other expletives. This state has serious issues with how child abuse is reported. There's confusion among the people required to report abuse on when to call, who to call, and families of color being reported on more often in cases where that's not warranted. Arnusha Roy looks at a potential overhaul of the system.
During the mandatory reporting task force meeting, the same concern kept coming up.
Recognizing that those who are reported on tend to be Black and brown and have under-resourced communities.
The problem is so big, the Child Protection Ombudsman said it's being discussed in every state in the country.
This is the issue of our time. When it comes to the world of child protection, children of color, particularly children who are Black, as well as of Native ancestry, are removed at almost 3 times the amount.
3 times the amount of their white counterparts.
Forcing the system to analyze, why is this racial disproportionality happening, right? It's not because these families abuse their children more often.
But the ombudsman said minority families are being reported on more often than getting involved in the child welfare system at higher rates when it's not always necessary.
They are being investigated or assessed more than their white counterparts. Then you move further into the system and you will see a higher removal of those children, a higher number in foster care.
Right now, mandatory reporters include doctors, nurses, teachers, even nutritionists, and have a responsibility to report abuse and neglect. Those tasked with fixing the system said it's the definition of neglect that's a big issue.
Poverty too often viewed as neglect, so conflating poverty with neglect.
And so a family who may not be able to provide housing, for example, or food for their children aren't necessarily abusive families, right? But they do need services. And unfortunately, the way the law is worked right now, you're getting all those families in the mix. Those that are accused of physical abuse, but those who also may just be in need of services to support their children.
It highlights the nuanced task at hand, making sure the system is protecting children both from abuse and bias.
Active removing a child from their parent has extraordinarily traumatic impact on them.
So the task force was created in part because of high-profile cases where children died. They're now going to be meeting over the next 2 years and then present their findings to the General Assembly, the governor, Colorado Department of Human Services, all to talk about how to change these laws. Part of that is going to be looking at what are better ways to get families connected to help. The thing is, these laws have been around since 1963. Colorado was one of the first in the country to create them, but over the years, Kyle, it wasn't looked at closely enough to make sure that it was still working in the way that it was intended to.
The stakes are so high for the mandated reporters because they never want to accuse somebody who's not doing something wrong. But if they don't make a report, kid could get hurt. They could get criminally charged.
Yeah, it is a really complicated and heavy situation. And the state said they kept getting calls from those mandatory reporters saying, we're confused. We don't know who to call. You said call right away. Is that 24 hours from now, 3 days from now, next week? They're asking for help, saying help us define the legal definitions of different types of abuse and help us with that training because they want to do right in these situations. That's the second half of what that task force is focusing on, is clarifying all of that.
Yeah, you got to think all these people have the heart in the right place.
Right.
They just want direction. Nusha, thank you.
Colorado's Attorney General is getting involved with the Safeway King Soopers merger, and they call him the Wonder Horse.
He has been an inspiration to myself and so many people here.
26-year-old horse that connects with therapy patients in a way that few horses can. Next.
A Republican who narrowly lost a state house race in Douglas County is asking for a recount. Kurt Huffman lost the House race in District 43 to Democratic challenger Bob Marshall by 405 votes. Close, but outside the margin for an automatic recount. Instead, Huffman's going to pay for it for a specific set of ballots. Election workers will go through more than 2,500 ballots that did not appear to include a choice in that House race. They'll also look at ballots that were damaged or required review by election judges. Secretary of State's office estimates this limited recount will cost Huffman about $700. He told us he asked for it because he was hearing voter concerns and wanted to be able to reassure people that the election was safe and secure. Colorado's Democratic Attorney General Phil Weiser is getting into a multi-state legal effort trying to stop Albertsons' $4 billion payout to shareholders while that company's merger with Kroger is under review. AG Weiser points to Albertsons' merger with Safeway in 2015 when the company pulled a similar move to avoid divesting stores.
We are not dealing in a situation that a company deserves the benefit of the doubt. We're in the opposite situation. We should be concerned.
Critics of this $4 billion dividend say that it's going to deplete Albertsons' assets to the point that it would be non-competitive if this merger is rejected by regulators. Later this week, a court in Washington will consider a motion to temporarily block the move. Weiser's office also has an investigation going into the merger, looking at concerns about higher prices, lower wages. Weiser says he's going to hold community forums across Colorado next year to gather feedback.
Quick check of your forecast on this chilly Thursday evening. Overnight low temperatures in the upper teens and lower 20s. And while it will be breezy, things are going to calm down really nicely as we get ready for some more sun tomorrow. And that sunshine continues through the majority of this weekend. Wind speeds have calmed down very nicely. Just about 2-3 hours ago, we were dealing with sustained winds between 30 to 35 miles per hour. Not the case right now in the Denver metro region. Clear skies for us, maybe a few light flurries up along the Front Range just to the west of Fort Collins. As we head from this afternoon into this evening, the skies are expected to remain clear. And maybe a few more snow showers likely just to the north of Steamboat Springs by tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow evening. Otherwise, much of the state is going to be dry. Overnight low temperature of 21 degrees in the Denver metro region. Lyman will do 15 degrees. Tomorrow, though, not too bad. Upper 40s and lower 50s. 7-day forecast also not looking too bad, especially for people who love the cold weather. Next week, temperatures drop back down into the 30s as highs. A little bit of snow likely on Monday and into Tuesday, much more so in the mountainous regions, back in the mid-30s by Wednesday and Thursday.
An equine therapy ranch has found a star in a blind horse named Spot.
After they see Spot, they're like, oh, well, if he gets to be confident and happy and goofy, why can't I be?
A day at the ranch, next.
That's cute. I think that's the first time I've seen that. Praying Hands Ranch in Parker wants folks facing setbacks to get back on the horse, quite literally. This ranch offers equine therapy for patients of all ages. And one of their horses in particular is quite popular, despite, perhaps because of, challenges of its own.
Hi, Spot. Look at him.
Spot is the boss of the applesauce.
I think he kind of became the mascot of Praying Hands Ranch. We work with people of all ages with different types of disabilities. Come in.
To somebody that maybe doesn't have confidence or hasn't always known where to fit in or to feel capable, Spot lets them feel capable.
You're on camera. No, smile. I just love seeing their confidence that they gain here, and especially after they see Spot, they're like, oh, well, if he gets to be confident and happy and goofy, why can't I be? Oh, all done. He came here with being slightly visually impaired, and now he is almost completely visually impaired now.
Yeah, I will never forget the night. I mean, it was really scary. We were just looking at him and realized he can't see. He couldn't see. And it was horrifying.
They thought that he was not going to be able to be out in his paddock again and be independent again, and that he would have to either live his life in a stall or we'd have to figure something else out for him.
And you want to think maybe about the quality of his life. Is it fair to have a horse that can't see? And the director, she said, maybe Spot still has a lot to teach us. But she was right.
And he showed us all that he did not change. He is still independent. He's still able to thrive.
Come here. He has been an inspiration to myself and so many people here.
And I think that that's such a message to other people that despite things happening, you can still thrive and be happy and not let the negative things that happen in your life change who you are.
If you're down there, look for Spot in Parker's Christmas Parade this Saturday.
Tonight's next question comes from Mary Lou Shelley. Mary Lou got a holiday card from Governor Jared Polis, much to her surprise, so she asked us how the governor's holiday card list gets compiled.
So this actually turned out to be a fascinating question, Mary Lou. The governor's office tells us that his holiday card list is kind of like a personal pet project of his. I would assume that a staff member would have handled it start to finish, but no. Apparently, the governor has a lengthy list of contacts that he's constantly adding to that he wants on this holiday card list. His office tells us if you received a card, chances are your path crossed with the governor at some point. Maybe you handed him a business card in exchange. Maybe you donated to his campaign. Maybe you said a kind word about him that he heard. We should note, just the paths crossing is not enough to make the list, because I've gotten crossed up with the governor many a number of times, and I'm not on the list for obvious reasons. We'll have your feedback next. Feedback from Twitter tonight. Person writes, hard question. If a community does a really good job dealing with homelessness or things like 100 immigrants showing up unannounced, wouldn't that invite more people with those same challenges? That is absolutely one way of thinking. We've talked about that here on Next before, that aspect of social science. We've talked about how some cities worry about that if they add services, and about how other cities try to be as inhospitable as possible to people experiencing homelessness or immigrants with the idea that they might not come there. This is not a new idea. In fact, I think the Bible actually has some verses on it. And somebody says, how about a micro-giving campaign to help the recently arrived migrants? We'll take a look at that. We want to vet the organizations, make sure that they can put the money to good use. But we'll take a look at it for you. See you next time.